Welcome to this explainer. Get ready, because today we are embarking on a massive 900-year epic journey right through the heart of early medieval India. Picture this: from the 7th to the 12th centuries, the Indian subcontinent was this incredibly fragmented landscape, but it was unified not by some sweeping single empire, but by a fiercely independent, culturally brilliant network of warrior clans. Yes, we are talking about the Rajputs. Their legacy literally carved the physical and cultural landscape of modern India. I mean, we're talking breathtaking forts, absolutely exquisite temples, and stories of bravery that honestly sound like they're straight out of a movie. So let's unpack exactly who these people were and how they completely shaped history. To really wrap our heads around the Rajputs, we've got to start with the name itself. The word Rajput actually comes from the ancient Sanskrit term Rajaputra, which translates directly to son of a king. And right off the bat, that etymology instantly grounds us in their royal, martial identity. It wasn't just a fancy title, it was a lineage. It was this incredibly heavy mantle of leadership and a lifelong, uncompromising commitment to protect and govern their people. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for understanding this massive era. We're going to cover the origins of the Rajputs, walk through the major dynasties, explore their intense warrior culture, admire them as master builders, break down their epic resistance to invasions, and finally, look at their lasting legacy today. So let's kick things off with Section 1, the origins of the Rajputs. Now, you might be wondering, how did these powerful clans just suddenly step onto the stage of history after Emperor Harshavardhana's reign fell apart in the 7th century? Well, there is a totally fascinating debate here, and it's neatly split right down the middle between myth and modern consensus. On the one hand, we have this wildly dramatic origin story called the Agni Kula theory. According to the famous epic poem, the Prithviraj Raso, the earliest Rajput clans magically emerged from a literal sacrificial fire pit at Mount Abu to fight off demons. No way, right? It's a fantastic legend. But if we contrast that with the widely accepted indigenous theory, modern historians argue a much more grounded reality. Basically, as the old empires fractured, local kshatriya, or warrior tribes and chiefs, gradually consolidated their power. Over time, they merged and intermarried to form this formidable collective Rajput identity. Moving right along to Section 2, the major Rajput dynasties. So once they established this identity, it's really important to note that they didn't just build one massive centralized empire. That wasn't their style. Instead, they operated under a decentralized feudal system, which kicked off a sprawling golden age across north and central India. You've got the Chauhans ruling from Ajmer in Delhi, anchored by the legendary Prithviraj Chauhan. Then over in central India at Dhar, you have the Paramaras, and of course the fiercely independent Sisodiyas down in Chittor and Udaipur, who boasted historical giants like Rana Sanga and Maharana Pratap. These were very distinct families, and actually, they were often fierce rivals, but they were all united by that shared cultural code we talked about. But hey, it wasn't strictly about the battlefields all the time. Let's look at King Bhoja of the Paramara dynasty, because he humanizes this sweeping history perfectly. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a multifaceted scholar king. I mean, sure, he built vast lakes and exquisite temples, but he also heavily patronized literature, philosophy, and science. Bhoja really became the absolute symbol of the ideal medieval king. He proves that this Rajput Golden Age was just as much about intellectual pursuit as it was about military might. And that brings us to Section 3, warrior culture and society. To truly understand what drove these people, we have to look at their strict society, which was entirely fueled by intense clan loyalty and incredibly rigid honor codes. And you see the absolute extremes of this in the practice of jauhar. When a fort was breached and defeat was absolutely certain, the men would put on saffron robes and ride out to fight to the death. Meanwhile, the women would commit mass self-immolation, literally stepping into roaring fires to avoid capture, enslavement, and dishonor by the enemy. It's a highly intense, deeply tragic historical reality, but it forcefully underscores a society that truly valued honor and spiritual purity far above mere survival. Yet what's really interesting is that despite this uncompromising, fierce warrior reputation, their society was incredibly diverse. While the Rajputs were devout Hindus, mostly supporting Shaivism, Vaishnavism, and Shaktism, they were totally pluralistic. They heavily patronized Jainism, too. In places like Rajasthan and Gujarat, wealthy merchant communities absolutely thrived under Rajput protection, and they funded these magnificent Jain temples. So it was actually a very thriving, tolerant, pluralistic society. Let's shift gears to Section 4, Master Builders of India. All that wealth and devotion led to an immense architectural legacy. If you visit North or Central India today, the physical landscape is literally still dominated by their mastery over stone. The Rajputs built these massive, near-impregnable structures like Chittorgarh Fort, which is the ultimate symbol of Rajput resistance. And then there's the staggering Kumbhalgarh Fort. Get this, its defensive walls are actually the second longest in the world, right after the Great Wall of China. How crazy is that? Beyond the forts, there's their spiritual architecture, the incredibly exquisite, intricately carved marble of the Dilwara Jain temples, and the world-famous Khajuraho monuments, showing off that iconic Nagara style with jaw-dropping sandstone carvings. They literally immortalize their entire culture in stone. But this brings us to a glaring contradiction. I really want you to think about this for a second. With these towering forts, limitless bravery, and a deeply entrenched warrior culture, why did the Rajputs ultimately fall to foreign invasions? I mean, what actually went wrong? Let's find out in Section 5, Invasions and Resistance. So, the tide of history turned pretty dramatically with the arrival of Turkish invaders, notably Muhammad of Ghazni and later on, Muhammad Ghori. And the Rajput downfall actually maps directly back to the very structures we've been talking about. The Rajputs were politically disunited. Remember that decentralized feudal system? Well, it meant there was no single strong central authority to coordinate a massive defense. They fought as separate clans. Plus, they relied on massive, slow-moving armies and traditional face-to-face sword combat, which, yes, was incredibly noble, but it was ultimately outdated when they came up against the swift, highly mobile cavalry archers used by the Turkish forces. It was just a fatal strategic mismatch. This tragic shift played out perfectly and terribly in the battles of Turin. In 1191, Prithvi Raj Chauhan successfully utilized sheer Rajput valor to actually defeat Muhammad Ghori. It was a massive win. But Ghori learned. He adapted his strategy. Just 1 year later, in 1192, Ghori returned, utilizing those swift cavalry tactics we just mentioned, and he utterly defeated Prithvi Raj. That single battle in 1192 completely shattered the Rajput hold on the northern plains and marked the definitive beginning of Turkish rule in North India. Let's move along and see how this builds, because after the shock of Turin, the resistance didn't just die out, it just shifted. Fast forward to 1527, and you have Rana Sanga leading a massive Rajput confederacy against Babur at the Battle of Kanwa. Unfortunately for the Rajputs, that battle consolidated Mughal rule. And then, jumping ahead to 1576, we see the legendary Battle of Haldigati, continuing centuries of relentless conflict. By the time we reach the Mughal era, Rajput strategy had completely split. On one hand, the Mughal Emperor Akbar was a total pragmatist. He offered inclusive administrative roles and forged matrimonial alliances. Many Rajput clans pragmatically chose to join the Mughal administration, which secured them peace and massive political influence. But then you have Maharana Pratap of Mewar. He famously refused to bow. He chose a life of immense hardship in the jungles over submission, mounting a legendary, lifelong resistance against the Mughal Empire. Two completely different paths, but both deeply rooted in that core Rajput identity. Which brings us to our final stop today, Section 6, the Rajput Legacy. So, what did this 900-year saga leave behind for our modern world? Well, their impact is absolutely immeasurable. Because they flat out refused to simply vanish under imperial pressure, they managed to preserve vital regional political traditions across India. They promoted iconic temple and fort architecture that literally drives global tourism today. They heavily encouraged regional literature, arts, and local languages. And above all, they became the eternal, enduring symbols of bravery and resistance in the Indian historical consciousness. I want to leave you with this final thought. The Rajputs never united to form a single, continent-spanning empire. Their intense clan rivalries arguably cost them the ultimate political prize. But look at what they built. Look at the incredible stories that survived. So tell me, did their fierce independence cost them an empire? Or is their unyielding cultural immortality actually the ultimate victory? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.